July 1944. Outskirts of Avignon, southern France. Oberleutnant Friedrich Kramer of the Waffe Logistics stood with mud up to his ankles. He spat on the ground, cursing the Americans. "They can't possibly land anything here," he muttered. "It's a swamp." A junior officer beside him laughed. "Let's see their mighty industry sink." They didn't know what was coming. Just past the tree line, a low drone emerged. Not one, not two, but a dozen. C-47s, wide-winged, unapologetic. One by one, they slammed into the muddy field, kicking up filth, dragging wheels through water, unloading jeeps, barrels, even field kitchens. Kramer's mouth hung open. He hadn't planned for this. He thought real planes needed concrete. He didn't know America never planned to land on perfection. They designed for mud. 3 months earlier, April 1944, Kramer stood on the tarmac at Orléans, watching a Junkers Ju-52 glide to a stop with the grace of a falcon. The airfield was orderly, concrete, clean, precisely measured for the German way of war. He nodded with satisfaction. "See," he told his adjutant, "this is what logistics looks like, not those primitive American cargo wagons with fabric wings." The men laughed. They had charts, inventories, ration tables, fuel estimates, all laid out with precision. German engineering, German calculation, German order. They didn't fear the Americans. Not really. To Kramer, the enemy was waste, overproduction, sloppiness, disguised as scale. Sure, the Americans had factories, but they built too fast, changed designs midstream, sent wooden crates to the front with parts from 3 different states. That wasn't power. That was desperation. "We don't need to drown the world in cargo," Kramer scoffed. "We only need to deliver what matters, on time, with precision." That was the myth he lived by, until Sicily, until Salerno, until the mud began to speak. In Italy, Kramer's illusions began to fracture. He saw American supply planes landing on beaches, still smoking from shellfire. He saw roads that weren't roads, just tire tracks across fields, suddenly filled with trucks, cranes, and canvas tents. He saw mobile runways built from pierced steel plates, laid down in a day. But still, he told himself it was luck. The Americans were burning fuel, like fools, dropping crates without manifests, letting enlisted men drive forklifts. Where was the discipline, the doctrine? At Orléans, Kramer still felt safe. Europe was theirs. The Reich stretched from Calais to Crimea. And then came the order. Southern France. Operation Dragoon. The Allies would strike below. "Impossible," Kramer said. "The terrain is all wrong. No ports, no runways. The Rhone Valley is a floodplain." But maps came in. So did decoded chatter. They weren't going to wait for airfields. They were going to bring the airfields with them. The Luftwaffe staff laughed, openly. "What are they going to do?" one captain mocked. "Land their planes in vineyards?" Kramer didn't laugh. He just stared at the satellite photos. Some showed steel mats. Some showed canvas strips. Others, just mud. And that's when the doubt crept in. What if they don't care about the ground? What if, unlike us, they've built everything to land anywhere? He shook it off. This plane can land on that, he said aloud. But his voice was quieter than before. August 15, 1944, the Rhone Valley. At first, the signs were subtle. Rain, steady and thin, like a whisper, began to fall the night before. By morning, the roads near Orange were little more than slush and ruts. The Wehrmacht supply trucks groaned in protest. Their tires spun, axles sank. Kramer cursed under his breath. We should have paved this stretch weeks ago. But command had dismissed his request. The Americans won't land here, they said. No need for over-preparation. Still, Kramer sent engineers. Too late. By the time they arrived, reports were already coming in. C-47s dropping in from the sea, using cleared farmland at makeshift runways. Kramer squinted through his binoculars at a distant field just beyond the tree line. He saw dust, then smoke, then the squat, gray silhouette of a Dakota skimming the trees. It touched down, fast and low, bouncing twice, tail swaying. Then it stopped. Doors swung open. Men poured out. So did crates, tires, even a small bulldozer. Impossible, he whispered. No runway, no concrete, no towers, just a strip of dirt, wet and uneven. His driver muttered, "Sir, how did they even find a landing zone?" Kramer didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at his own boots, sinking slowly into mud. That afternoon, a forward Luftwaffe air unit called in. They needed fuel. Fast. But the trucks couldn't get through. The roads had collapsed into trenches of brown water and broken stone. One unit tried horses. The animals refused to walk. Still, Kramer held the line. "We move by rail," he insisted. "We are not peasants." But even the trains began to fail. Bridges bombed. Switches sabotaged. Signals dark. That night, Feldwebel Otto, a veteran driver, knocked on Kramer's tent. "Sir, we have a problem." Kramer glanced up. "Another road gone?" "No. An American airstrip. They built it in less than a day. With some kind of metal mesh. Our scouts say planes are already landing." The silence in the tent hung heavy. Finally, Kramer spoke. "Did it hold?" Otto nodded. "Perfectly. Even in the rain." Kramer leaned back. Outside, the rain kept falling. But for the first time, it didn't feel like just weather. It felt like a message. By the second week of August, the map on Kramer's wall had started to bleed. Red pins marked Allied landings. Blue lines showed German roads, most of them now crossed out in pencil. His clerks updated the logistics board every hour, erasing routes as they collapsed under bombardment or rain. And then came the silence. Entire convoys disappeared without a trace. One unit lost contact just outside Montelimar. No radio, no signal, nothing. A patrol, sent to investigate, found the trucks still intact, but empty. Boxes pried open. Fuel gone. Crates stripped. Rations missing. One soldier found a label left behind. In English. Kramer held it in his hand that night, staring at the letters like a code. U.S. Army Air Service. Forward Supply Node. Priority Drop 4. A drop? Here? There was no airfield for miles. He didn't understand. And then he did. The Americans weren't landing on airfields anymore. They were landing airfields. A reconnaissance photo confirmed it. Near Valreyes, a temporary runway had appeared. Overnight. Hundreds of metal panels, slotted together like scales. On top, C-47s landed in rotation. One unloaded barrels of gasoline. Another dropped crates of spare parts. A third carried nothing but chocolate bars and cigarettes. Kramer threw the photo across the room. "This is madness," he muttered. "They're wasting fuel, men, machines. No doctrine, no structure." But it was working. Worse, it was accelerating. Reports came in. Engineers moving with parachute units, laying steel mats within hours of capture. Bulldozers flown in by glider. Trucks unloaded directly onto the field. Fuel lines rigged with rubber hose. No waiting, no scheduling, no perfection, just motion. Meanwhile, Kramer's own plans disintegrated. A bridge near Vivio gave out under a Tiger tank, collapsing into the river below. A convoy of tankers misread hand-drawn maps and ended up circling for 5 hours. One ran out of fuel mid-turn. Even Luftwaffe pilots began to grumble. "I spend more time waiting for parts than flying," one said. Another whispered, "I saw the Americans land a whole field kitchen from the sky, and a band was playing." Kramer didn't reply, because he had seen it too. From the edge of a hill the day before, binoculars pressed to his face, he'd watched a small American unit set up an airstrip, cook a meal, and unload a jeep, all within 90 minutes. He watched a soldier sip coffee while guiding a plane with 2 sticks and a red scarf. He remembered thinking, "This is not war, this is theater." But now, under the weight of missing trucks and dead radios, he wasn't so sure. Maybe the theater was the war. August 19th, 1944. Late afternoon. Kramer sat alone beneath a collapsed telegraph pole. His boots soaked, the mud now permanent. In his hand was a crumpled field report. American engineers had landed 2 fuel bladders and a mobile tower on a vineyard slope. The scribbled note at the bottom chilled him. C-47s operated in pairs. One carried materials. The other carried the crew who built the runway. They were landing before the field existed. That night, a Luftwaffe captain, returning from a captured depot, brought something stranger than fuel. A crate of American rations, still sealed. Inside, powdered eggs, coffee tins, and 3 glass bottles. Coca-Cola. Kramer turned one over in his hand. Cold. Somehow. "How?" he asked aloud. The captain grinned bitterly. "They dropped a refrigerator unit with the medic tent. There's a generator, too." Kramer stared at the bottle. The label still intact. The glass unbroken. The taste of civilian life in the middle of collapse. He thought of German pilots rationing bread, drying socks over engine heat. And here, their enemies drank soda from the sky. Later, in a requisitioned farmhouse, Kramer flipped through confiscated documents, stars and stripes, U.S. logistics maps, even a flyer for a roughest airdrop system. One phrase kept repeating: speed over symmetry, function over form, supply must never sleep. He leaned back, eyes unfocused. They weren't chasing the perfect supply chain. They were chasing momentum. That was the moment it broke. Not the roads, not the radios. His certainty. For the first time since the war began, he felt something deeper than doubt. He felt outmatched. Not by steel, not by bullets, but by the way they thought. August 21st, 1944. The sun hadn't risen, but Kramer couldn't sleep. He sat by a lantern, flipping through a captured American logistics manual, the kind soldiers laughed at when they found them. Not tonight. Page after page, it laid out how to land cargo planes on almost anything: sand, snow, marsh, gravel, cornfields, no air tower, no navigation system, just a metal net, a compass, and two men with flags. Each diagram was hand-labeled: mud-ready, slush-compatible, jungle-viable. On one margin, a handwritten note in blue ink: tested in New Guinea, worked every time. Kramer stared. The Americans hadn't built for Europe. They had built for chaos. They had trained for the worst road, the wettest hill, the ugliest battlefield. He found a memo from the U.S. Army Air Forces. It detailed how to disassemble an airstrip in under an hour, roll up the steel mesh, pack it, move it, redeploy by sundown. They didn't just arrive fast, they vanished fast. Kramer rubbed his eyes. None of it made sense, unless they never wanted to control the terrain. They wanted to bypass it. Down the hall, a junior officer was reading a Stars and Stripes issue aloud to his comrades, mostly for laughs. Kramer paused outside the room. The boys in the 807th dropped in with bulldozers, Coleman stoves, and the Dodgers game on shortwave. By dinner, they had a chow tent, showers, and a strip wide enough for 3 Dakotas. Laughter. But not Kramer's. He stepped in and held up a hand. Where is that unit now? The room quieted. Sir? That outfit. The 807th. Where are they now? Valreyas, we think. At least 2 miles inside what we assumed was impassable ground. No one moved. Kramer turned, walked outside, and lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. Across the valley, in the low, gray light, he saw it. 3 dots descending, straight into mud. No flaps, no hesitation. C-47s. The last one braked hard, its wheels kicking up slop, its fuselage shimmering with water, and stopped perfectly aligned between 2 stone walls. Kramer whispered, almost to himself, "They're not landing on mud. They're using it." And in that moment, the war changed for him. It was no longer about tanks or tactics. It was about ideas, and his had just collapsed. August 24th, 1944. By now, Oberleutnant Friedrich Kramer had stopped sending reports, not because he had no data, but because the data no longer made sense. Every morning, he woke to a new impossibility. A convoy of American trucks had somehow reached a village 2 days before the road was cleared. A glider unit had deployed an entire communications relay and left before Luftwaffe scouts could pinpoint it. A captured pilot said they'd built airstrips with the planes themselves, dropping steel plates, circling until they cooled, then landing right on top of them. Kramer asked him twice. The man nodded. "We've done it in Burma. We're just doing it here too." That night, in a commandeered villa, Kramer sat across from Oberst Dieter Hentz, a senior logistics planner sent from Berlin. Kramer laid out everything: the crates, the portable fuel bladders, the time-coded drops, the modular panels. He finished with the Coca-Cola bottle, still half full, still cold. Hentz stared, silent. Then he leaned forward. "We assumed we'd be fighting men," he said. "Not factories, on wings." Kramer lit a cigarette. "We built for victory on rails." They built for chaos in the sky, and neither spoke for a long while. Outside, thunder cracked over the valley. The fields, what was left of them, shimmered under the storm. And then came the whine. Not bombs, not fighters. Cargo. A trio of C-47s descended just over the ridgeline, wheels hitting steel with a wet thud. Each dropped its load, fuel, food, parts, and lifted off within minutes. No tower, no ground crew, just timing and nerve. One of the planes swayed hard on takeoff. Its wing scraped a treetop. A moment of silence, then it vanished into cloud. "Even their errors work," Hentz said. Kramer didn't answer. He walked to the map, pulled a red pencil from his pocket, and began drawing arrows, not to enemy positions, but to supply lines, to places he now knew they could reach. Mud no longer slowed them. Darkness no longer concealed them. And fear? They didn't seem to feel it. 2 days later, a diary was found on a captured American engineer. It read, "They keep calling it mud. We call it Tuesday." Kramer read it. Twice, he didn't laugh. He folded the poem, tucked it into his coat, and wrote one sentence in his own journal. "I think we lost before we even saw them." August 27th, 1944. Kramer finally saw it. The real weapon. It wasn't the C-47 itself. Not the steel mats. Not the gliders, or the crates, or the Coca-Cola. It was the system. From a bluff outside Le Luc, he watched a ballet of motion, too precise to be improvised, too flexible to be rigid. American engineering units, all numbered and color-coded, worked like clockwork. One team laid down pierced steel planking. Another unpacked rubber hoses, connecting fuel bladders to collapsible tanks. A third team moved crates off incoming planes. No manifests, just pre-colored tags that matched stenciled stripes on the runway. Red meant fuel. Green meant food. Blue meant parts. No need for translators. No delays. Everything was modular. Everything fit. A sergeant handed down toolboxes that clicked perfectly into racks on the sides of jeeps that had just rolled out of the aircraft's belly. There was no shouting, no debate, just movement. Nearby, a captured American was being interrogated. He said he was with the 873rd Airborne Quartermaster Company. When asked how they coordinated supply across broken roads and uncharted land, he smiled and said, "Sir, we don't fix the road. We fly over it." Kramer had no reply. Because in the Reich, supply meant trains, vulnerable to sabotage. It meant columns, stuck in traffic, frozen by mud, bombed on curves. It meant waiting for bridges, for orders, for weather. But the Americans didn't wait. They flew over rivers, dropped gear into ravines, landed on fields, still warm from shell fire. They didn't adjust to terrain. They ignored it. And now, Kramer understood why the C-47 looked so plain. No sleek lines, no swept wings, just a cargo box with engines. Because it wasn't built to impress. It was built to arrive, every time, anywhere. August 29th, 1944. Kramer walked the ruins of what used to be a forward Luftwaffe depot. A bombing run had ripped open the roof. Flames curled around shattered beams and twisted metal. What struck him wasn't the destruction. It was the clutter. Different crates, different bolts, different calibers, nothing matched. Two mechanics argued over spare parts for 3 similar trucks, none of which shared the same axle. "Everything is custom," one said, "even the oil caps." Kramer didn't respond, because that was Germany's pride: specialization, precision, mastery. Now it was a curse. Down the road, he passed a captured American Jeep, bullet holes across the hood, but still running. Inside, a toolbox was clipped neatly to the side, stenciled with numbers that matched the broken fan belt. Standardized, serialized, replaceable in minutes, not hours. And that was the difference. Germany had engineered for excellence. America had engineered for replacement. At a nearby outpost, Kramer found an American field manual left behind. He flipped through its thick pages, diagrams, color codes, protocols. One page showed a map of U.S. wartime manufacturing. Ohio-built gear assemblies, Kansas molded tires, California cast engines. Each factory made just one piece. Then those pieces moved by rail, by truck, by ship, by plane to Europe. When they landed, the soldiers didn't fix things. They swapped them, engine out, engine in, wheel off, wheel on. No measurement, no delay. Kramer looked up. They weren't fighting with machines. They were fighting with a concept. A war fought by a democracy of parts, everyone contributing just one thing, and all of it fitting together perfectly. A Luftwaffe mechanic once said, "When a German plane lands damaged, we rebuild it. When an American plane lands damaged, they fly in a new wing." At the time, Kramer had laughed. Now he wasn't laughing, because he had just seen it. A C-47, with half its tail shredded, had landed on a tilted stretch of dirt, rolled to a stop, kicked off its load, and turned around. By nightfall, it was flying again, with a tail from another aircraft. Paint didn't even match. But it didn't matter. It flew. By September 1944, the Luftwaffe wasn't retreating from battle. It was retreating from math. Kramer stared at a page from an American intelligence report, smuggled in from a contact in Vichy. On it were just numbers, but they hit harder than any shell. C-47. Skytrains produced 10 174. Pre-operational in Europe, over 4,200. Ending field built per week, 27. Ride dime, lay a runway, some 8 hours. Fuel consumption per day, reach 2 million gallons. He led trained per month. 3,000. He read it again, slowly. They weren't supplying an army. They were supplying a continent. Back in Berlin, a report from the General Stab tried to comfort High Command. American wastefulness will undo them. Their speed breeds error. But Kramer had seen it. There were no errors, only trade-offs. And they had chosen movement over perfection. He remembered a day when a German column took 4 hours to fix a broken wheel. That same day, a C-47 landed nearby, kicked off a new one, and was gone in 7 minutes. They didn't waste time fixing things. They replaced them. Because they could. Because their factories had no bottlenecks. Because their system wasn't afraid of loss. In late August, American gliders dropped bulldozers onto a hill west of Grenoble. Within 24 hours, a 2-lane supply road appeared, lined with sandbags, marked with colored flags. At its end, a fuel dump made of inflatable tanks and foldable piping. Meanwhile, Kramer still had units rationing horse feed. In one intercepted Stars and Stripes article, a frontline corporal wrote, "We drop fuel to chase fuel. We burn steel to save time. But we're always moving. That's how we win." It made sense now. They weren't just outrunning German bullets. They were outrunning German thought. That night, Kramer reviewed a comparison chart handwritten by his aide. Germany. Tanks, 6 models in operation. Cargo aircraft, 2 models. Fuel lines. Fixed. Roads. Centralized planning. United States. Tanks, 2 core models. Cargo aircraft, 1 primary. The C-47. Fuel, portable, airborne, glider deployed. Roads, temporary, redundant, constantly shifting. At the bottom, his aide had added a note in pencil. We innovate for victory. They produce for momentum. Kramer underlined it. Then he wrote a line beneath. They win not because they shoot better, but because they never stop arriving. And that was the truth. In this war, control was a myth. The Americans hadn't mastered the terrain. They'd stopped caring about it. Echo and final twist. September 5th, 1944. Rain again, the same boots, the same mud. But now, Kramer stood still. No orders. No maps. Just silence. Behind him, the supply depot was gone. Overrun or abandoned, he didn't know which. Ahead, across a clearing soaked in fog, he saw it one last time. A C-47. Landing slow, heavy, inevitable. Its wheels punched into the swamp, sprayed earth, skidded sideways, and still it came to a stop. Behind it, another one. And another. The sky was full. It had become their highway. And this field, this ugly, broken, unworthy field, was now an airbase. An American stepped down from the plane, laughing, boots splashing through the muck. He slapped the tail twice and waved to the next crew. Kramer didn't hide. The soldier didn't react. Just kept moving crates, side by side, with two black troops and a medic in a Red Cross armband. No one aimed a weapon. No one shouted. It was a rhythm, now, repetition, precision, like a machine, not of gears, but of people. And then one of them turned. Saw him. A nod. That was all. Not pity, not fear, just momentum. Kramer turned away. He looked down at his boots. Stuck again. But he didn't curse this time, because now he knew. In July, he had laughed at the mud. In September, it had become a runway. And somewhere, deep in the American sky, another plane was already on its way.